And we're back to the story of Ozzie and Harriet transformed. Welcome to the ultimatehouse.com. This is session 3, the third of 3. As you recall, I started off by saying this was a rolling remodel. We'll get to that, but I will show you some of the structural work for the addition where the kitchen is, and then we'll circle back and look at the complete redesign of the entire front of the house, which was added on. So the structural work includes foundations, framing, and roof. You've seen this plan before. Even though we actually are only adding on this amount of new space here and this little piece in the garage, or stealing this little piece from the garage, we're actually stripping this entire section and essentially building an addition that's this big. The way the new one was designed with cathedral ceilings and new structure and movement of the interior walls, it just made more sense to completely strip it all out and start all over again. This wall, this wall, this closet wall, this wall, and this wall, all these walls were being taken out anyway. So really all we were left with was the platform to build, and then the entire roof was completely different design as well, as you will see. So here's the foundation plan. It shows the new footings. These dotted lines here show the old footings. So here's the plan blown up, and what it shows you here is these are existing girders that held up the 2x6 floor joists. So we had a couple of those. Then we had the old foundation here, and we had to add a new girder in this area, so we would have the same kind of framing, the same 2x6 framing that could match up to the existing. Same thing in this section. Then you can also see here there are two pads or small footings, and these hold up the posts which hold up the new structural ridge beam. In the center of this building is going to be one new ridge beam, or the top of the roof coming right down here, and because it's a structural ridge beam, it's supporting the entire load, so that load gets transferred to these two posts and down to these footings. That was done so we could have a cathedral ceiling on the inside. These are just some various details. This is a particular hold down with an embedment into existing or this was new concrete, but here's another one here that shows embedment to existing concrete and various details for the structural work. And this is what it looked like when we started taking it apart. So you can see there's just the garage is over in this area. This is the existing living room, and all these walls are coming out. The roof is already peeled back all the way to the living room. The heating and cooling ducts are disconnected and pushed back for the time being. And we start framing. So it's a kind of a jigsaw puzzle. This is the garage area where we had the new footing, which allowed us to steal a little space out of the garage. This ends up becoming the bar. And you can see we've got some plumbing set up here, getting ready for the sink. And then there's also plumbing back here set up for this laundry room, which was back in this area. You can see the new 2x6 floor joists here splicing across from the old foundation to the new foundation. And here's on the other end of the house with a new addition over here. You can see this is all new framing, a new girder, new 2x6 floor joists. Each one of them has blocking in between with a special engineered clip. You can see that as well here. And then we had to cut open the old foundation so that we could have access to between the two foundations, or two crawl spaces. And then up go the walls. You can see we start framing up the walls while we still actually have the floor open, because I think we had to do some additional plumbing and some other mechanical work underneath. So we're trying to double time it. You can see some of the plumbing is set up here for the new bathroom. And this will be the new kitchen wall. Here's a shot of it with our shortest supervisor right here. But you can see the walls are starting to come up for the first floor. Existing roof. Here's a shot of the roof plan. Again, here's that ridge beam. And this shows you how the rafters, these are 2 by 8 rafters, I think, at 16 inches on center. And then here is the new valley and what we call a California roof, where the old roof will frame on top of the new roof. And just a few different details for the structural work in that particular section. So here's a shear wall connection where we have a shear wall, a structural stiffening wall on the side of the building. It needs to transfer correctly up to the roof diaphragm. So it shows you the exact nailing and the blocking between the vertical wall and the roof plane to make that a solid structural connection. All kinds of that stuff in California. And because we were building this section over here, it affected part of the existing house, and we had to have a new steel beam in this section because it was such a big opening. Steel beam allowed us to have a smaller beam than a wood beam, and we wanted to keep it up high above these doors. These doors ended up getting replaced as they decided later on to increase the scope of the work, but at this point we were working around them. And here you can see the new roof connecting to the existing building. So a couple of things. Here is that post and ridge beam connection. You can see there's a structural steel connector there. And the ridge beam up top here looks like it's about a 4-inch by maybe 16-inch beam up top. A big laminated wood beam. By contrast, here's the old ridge beam, a 2 by 6 and 2 by 6 rafters. So the old rafters were thinner, the new rafters are bigger. New codes require bigger framing members. And then this new ridge beam is supported by this post on either end. And here is a view looking out the kitchen towards the backyard, and you can see the ridge beam up here and the open span between the entire building. What we're going to end up doing is coming inside. There's going to be a wall here, and we're going to come inside the kitchen and create a second peak, or a false peak, so that it centers over the kitchen. And you can see that here. Here's the wall. Here's the center line of the roof coming across. You can see our scissors trusses. These will be exposed, as you've already seen in the design. So all that's set up in the structure of the building, and this all centers on the windows and the center line of the kitchen. Kind of a tricky way to make it look as though you have a cathedral roof over your ceiling, when actually the roof is not doing that on the inside. And you can see that from the various elevation plans of the work. This is the garage area here, and this is the new addition area. So when we look at it in a section, you can see the garage here and another level for the living area slightly above, the area that we stole back for the little bar, and the line of the old roof. So the old roof had quite a high peak because it was a fairly wide building. If we look at it from the north side, the north elevation, this is where the pool is out here, and these are the doors where I was just showing you that new steel beam went in. You can see how this roof coming over the entire addition, a much bigger scale than the smaller one, which I'll show you in a second, which made this line just make more sense. You know, the massing of the building look a lot more like it made sense and was designed for the building rather than the tiny little addition that they had. So this is the exterior elevation, and then this is the section of this same room although it's flipped around, so it's as though you're inside the room looking out. So all these windows right over here are these windows over here, and the center of the kitchen lines up right here, right through those truss beams, and here's that false cathedral roof underneath the main gable. Interesting, actually pretty tricky fitting all these little parts together. And as you can also see, the windows on the kitchen come very close to where the roof of the bathroom is. So it all fit in very tightly. A blow up of that same detail. The elevation here, and then the section looking out right here. These section drawings really help you understand what's going on in the plan. And this is what it looked like before. So again, it had this little hip roof. Here you can see the original big gable with the what we call the gable on hip, and then they had these little tiny gables which they added on in all the additions. Framing up the new roof, again you can see this whole section is all new framing, and we're about to sheet the roof, which is a structural component of the whole structural detail. You can see there are shear walls. Here's a shear wall here, which has to be installed before this little part of the addition can be built on. So this is a stiffener, and then there's another shear wall on this section, and then we build the bathroom on top of that so it can all get nailed in and bolted down properly. And here it is all paneled up. And the finish shot of the building. So the same section, you can see actually you can see how the doors changed right here. A cathedral ceiling with some skylights in the living room. You can't see it through here, but there's a couple skylights over the kitchen as well. And the line of that roof inside the kitchen is like something like that. And that brings us on to phase 3 or phase 4 or 5. I can't remember how many phases we had on this job, but they kept adding on as we fixed one thing. I use this analogy of pulling the thread on an old sweater, which I talked with them about several times, because you'd get one nice section of the building and then the older section looks worse than it did before. So the rolling remodel kind of idea has good and bad points. It's difficult. Well, for one thing, if you're doing significant additional work, it may mean that you need to go back through the whole permitting process. So essentially you're starting the entire construction process over again. Obviously, if you've known from the beginning all of the work that you've done, you wouldn't be redoubling that effort over and over again, but it's very common that remodels happen this way. At any rate, back to the design board, back and forth. You have to finalize the design, of course, before you submit for your permits. Then you've got to go through the usual permitting process, and then scheduling all of your trades, your drywall people, your electrician, your plumber. They may already be leaving the job from roughing in the electrical and plumbing on the first edition, and then you have a second edition coming in, so they have to come in for a very small part. Sometimes it's difficult to get the trades in for little pieces, and then you have drywallers working there who typically would be towards the end of the project. At the same time, you have guys installing new concrete footings. So it gets a little crazy, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. The other joke that always seems to happen is the scope of work doubles, but the deadline never changes. So you do a really good job getting things done quickly, efficiently in the beginning, and you're on track, and everybody sees how well you're doing, and they're like, oh, well, we want to do this too. Oh, but we still have to move in by such and such date. That's happened to me more than once. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The best thing to do is look at schedules and figure out, the realistic way to do things. this is the front of the house, the old front of the house. Now, of course, it's a fine looking, very nice house, but from their point of view, it was very dated. They hated the sort of 60s ranchy Ozzie and Harriet look, and they wanted something different. So the plain design and this little addition here was another little hip roof on the end of it, which kind of made it look small. The garage had this kind of weird door with some glass on top, and of course that addition in the back was small compared to the nice lines of the main house with that original. If you look at it here, you can see the original design with the gable on hip. So the original house probably looked something like this, and then this piece was added, this piece was added, etc., etc. So I came up with a bunch of different sketches of, we thought of a lot of different ways that we could change the appearance of this house. I wish I'd kept some of those sketches, but we ended up mocking up. I came up eventually with the idea of changing all these little hips to significant, to gable ends. So what that meant was creating a dormer over the entry and then getting rid of that little hip on this bedroom addition back here, one over the entry, and then changing the garage from the existing, actually there wasn't, the roof just came straight down over here. So we changed the garage, and then we also had the line of the new addition roof back here. So it kind of reminded me, I think I got the concept from some buildings in New England where there are triple gables on the end. And the owners really liked the idea of sort of the clean straight lines of a house they'd seen in Napa. So we used the existing board and batten siding and kept that, and we added a metal roof which had also very distinctive vertical lines on it. We added some little rooflets over this window and one over the garage, and we came up with a completely different look for the house. Back to the building department, all of these little cloud things mean that they are plan revisions. So you can see there's a little roof there, a little roof there, a little roof there. I think at this time we're also doing that steel beam over the living room. And what was really interesting was not only were we changing the outside, but the front hallway was very small, and they wanted a grander feel to that. So the existing house did this. So there's a covered porch out here. You would walk up the stairs, and the front doorway was centered on the middle of the house. The front door was not centered in the hallway, but it looked as though it was centered from the house. There was a little closet right here. This is a powder room. And we decided to steal some extra space here and move the front door out to the front of the building. We still had a little setback. Here you can see the old, how the building notched back here, and the old front doorway. And the new plan was to pull the entryway out, still have a little bit of a closet right here, a little bit of a coat closet, and create a hallway which was quite a bit deeper and not only had a nice front door, but side lights on the sides of the front door, so much more light could come in this way. And I devised a way to bring light in from up above. Now the dormer that was on top of this was centered on the center of the house, somewhere about here between these two posts. So it was off-center to the center line of the actual entryway. But the door in the entryway is centered. So bear with me. Here's the hallway, right? Door is centered in the hallway, not centered on the house. Of course, the dormer had to be centered on the house, as you can see here, because it was such a prominent feature. But the doorway didn't really. We got away with setting it back. You can't, it's recessed in here, and it worked out. But the owner really wanted to have a cathedral ceiling in here, but the hallway being on a different center line from this, it would have looked really awkward, and we couldn't create a false ceiling in there because look at these windows. We wouldn't have had the light come in, or you certainly wouldn't want to see a wall cutting through that upper window. So what I was able to do was to create a light well, which I'll show you. You can see here, this shows the current building permit and then the addition that we were able to add on to the permit. So we've got sections for each one of these new little roofs. This is the front entryway, and the dormer is going to come up here and over the hallway. This is the one over the bedroom. Here's the existing hip roof. We're going to get rid of that, and we're going to have a new gable end. And then we're going to add a new gable end on the garage as well. We had the front door with the side panel, so much more elegant looking front door with more light coming in from the side lights. A slightly different window design cut up. We're still using rectangular lights that are used around the house, but we're starting to play off the existing windows a little bit, and although we're changing, we're still relating to the existing building. And I did elevations for each wall, and I created a paneling which allowed us to have both side walls and the ceiling all come together in this little kind of a jewel box. This is a reflected ceiling plan. And inside the paneling here, we had two pieces of white glass which allowed all of the light to shine through from that great dormer window up above. But remember, that dormer was something like this, with a center like that. So the window is over here, but you can't tell when you're looking from underneath because you don't see it. Of course, the attic was a complete mess. It had blown in fiberglass insulation, which is really nasty. It's just shreds of fiberglass all over. Things like this, if you ever see stuff like this, you know somebody has been really screwing up in your house. It's an open electrical junction box which has way too many connections inside it without a cover left on it. A lot of times in older homes, when things, maybe these lights here were added, one thing gets added to another, and the easiest route is not always the most acceptable route, and this may have been done without permits or without a building inspector looking at it. At any rate, we had to clean up all that stuff. The old heating system, as you recall, this house is sort of U-shaped and fairly good sized house. I think it was, I don't know, about 5,000 square feet. So the existing heating unit, which would have been fine for the main original building, now is wrapping all the way down here, probably 100 feet on either side, to these long ducts. And when you have forced air like this on an old system that wasn't meant to do it, the people at the end of these runs really don't get any heating and air. So we ended up removing this system and putting two new high efficiency systems in, one on either side of the building, which gave us a much more even flow for the heating and air conditioning. This is the false ceiling of the living room. So again, it's a cathedral roof underneath the existing roof. More heating stuff. Another thing, you get low voltage wiring, phone wiring, alarm systems. With every new owner, it seems they get a new alarm system, and they never take out the old wires. They just pile in a whole bunch of new wires. This is the garage. The garage ended up getting a flat ceiling in it with a little room above it, and all of this framing and all this crappy old stuff got removed. But really one of my favorite parts of the house was this front hallway. So you can see here the door with the side lights that we spoke of, the paneling, wide pieces differentiated by high gloss and flat paint, and the paneling connecting to the paneling on the ceiling, and the paneling in the ceiling fitting in with these recessed white glass pieces. There's another shot of it. We changed out all the base molding to a thicker base molding, and then you can see how wide these panels are, 3 or 4 feet. Very unusual, but became very elegant and came, the proportions were very pretty, how they wrapped all the way around on the top part. Really like that front hallway. And the old powder room that was on the side became this little gem of a powder room. The designers had the idea of taking this tile and wrapping it around the corner. And then we had a frameless glass door here. Little sink, very delicate and sparkly. The living room. So this is the fake cathedral I was showing you inside the cathedral from the attic. And now you can see these doors, which have all been replaced from the original doors, and more of the similar kind of cut-ups that we had here in the front door. So it makes sense going all the way through the house. Here you can see a couple of the structural photos of the work being done, the framing. Here's of course the dormer over the hallway, the new roof over the little bedroom, bringing out the front wall, and installing this custom triangular window. So in each one of these little areas we had to patch in our siding. Little rooflet here. Here's a shot of the garage. We ended up adding a little rooflet over the garage, which was a detail I really like. Here you can see some more in-process work. Shot of the window with the steel roof installed. And this is Mario, sheet metal man, installing a little bit of steel roof on top of this rooflet. And I designed these steel frames, had these welded up at a custom shop. You can see they come all the way across here. We had a garage door, which now also started to match the idea of the design of the doors that we're using in the house. And of course, white glass panels. It's a shot of that all installed with some beaded sheathing underneath. And here's the finished shot. So you can see we're using some really pretty use of all the lines, the linear look of the metal roof and the board and batten siding. And the brick was replaced with all this beautiful ledge stone. This is actually a waterfall piece where the water trickled over the front and kind of left this whole front face wet. New trees, a couple boulders. And that's about a wrap for the Ozzie and Harriet house. Pretty fabulous looking project, I think. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email. Enjoyed showing you this project and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you very much.